welcome back to my channel, Health Layers. So today I want to talk about something that's really important, osteoporosis. As many of you may know, if you follow me on my Instagram, which you should right now, and subscribe before you forget, I recently volunteered at a health fair in West Kendall, Florida. Basically, the University of Miami has two different groups, docs and PHSA. And each of these are either made up of medical students or public health students. And together they do health fairs in which they kind of see patients, they talk about pediatric education, they talk about cardiac health, they talk about exercise, they talk about bone health, like bone density, which was my station. They talk about a whole bunch of stuff. They even have actual physicians there to do pap smears and do breast exams and, you know, take blood samples and things like this. So if you ever hear of a health fair, make sure to attend if it's near you. So we're gonna be talking about osteoporosis. This is a huge issue, but what is osteoporosis? Osteoporosis is basically porous bone. Anything that is porous is not very strong. So when you have porous bone, you are more likely to have a fracture. So for example, if you are diagnosed with osteoporosis, and you trip and fall, or you bump your hip on something, or you run into something, you may fracture a bone. And so this is very dangerous, not only because it makes you more likely to have a fracture, but also because even if you don't actually have some kind of trauma, you can still lose some bone. So your spine is also bone, obviously. Your vertebra is made up of bone. And when your bone is too weak, even just standing straight on daily activities, you can start to erode layers of the spine. And so you can have curvature, so you're gonna be hunched over, or simply you just might lose some inches, some stature. So this is very important to talk about, and I feel like not a lot of people know about bone health, and I think it's extremely important. And because I was able to volunteer at this health fair in the bone density section, I decided to talk about this today. So osteoporosis, like I said, is porous bone, and it's usually diagnosed using what's called a DEXA scan, which is when they lay you flat and they put like a really crazy C-arm over a table and they go like this with you laying on it, and they scan your bone. They scan your hips and a bunch of other bones, and they come out with a number. This number kind of says how strong your bones are. So I don't want to go too sciencey into this and what the levels are and what number it is you need to be in, but I would say that if your number is below what is normal, you can be diagnosed with something called osteopenia, which means that you do have bone loss. A lower number than that, it's osteoporosis, and that increases your risk of fractures, which is very dangerous, because those who have hip fractures actually have a very poor prognosis, meaning that people with hip fractures can actually affect their survival time. So their mortality is a lot higher. So this is very important to talk about, especially because we're a growing society and we are an aging population and we're all getting older. So what do I want to talk about today? Risk factors for osteoporosis, things that put you at risk, but more importantly, I also want to discuss things that can protect you. I want to be able to give you guys some tips and advice on what you can do to keep your bones healthy starting today. If you're 16, if you're 20, if you're 30, if you're 40, if you're 60, if you're 70, if you're 80, there's always something you can do, either to prevent it from starting to begin with, or to prevent it from progressing and getting worse. So once you are diagnosed with osteoporosis, you cannot take it back, you can't fix it, but you can slow down the progression. So osteoporosis is something that everyone is going to deal with. It's something that we start dealing with once we hit the mid-20s, even the early 20s. Once you are already in your early 20s and you keep aging beyond that, you have a slow bone loss. And that continues steadily throughout your life. Now, both men and women suffer from this, and all ethnicities, but there are certain things that put you at higher risk. So I'm going to talk about those now. So obviously, your gender. And I know this, a lot of doctors know this, a lot of people in medicine and science know this, but maybe some of you may not. So as we all know, because this we do know, women go through what is called as menopause. And yes, it has a lot to do with hormones. It's all about the hormones, guys and ladies, unfortunately. So what does this have to do with bone? Estrogen, I like to call the bouncer. You know, like a bouncer at a club or a bouncer at a place you're trying to get into. Your bone is the actual location, the club, the bar, whatever it is. And then the people outside making line, those would be two different kinds of cells that work on bone. Osteoblasts, which build your bone, or OsteoCLASTS. They erode it, they break it down. Okay, so what happens here is that the osteoclasts are kind of kept at ease by estrogen. It prevents osteoclasts from destroying your bone. But as you reach menopause, your levels of estrogen go lower and lower and lower, and then after menopause, you have absolutely no estrogen, and so osteoclasts can wreak havoc on your bones. This means that postmenopausal women are at increased risk of osteoporosis. What else is a risk factor? Well, another risk factor is your ethnicity. Turns out that osteoporosis is most common, okay, in non-Hispanic white females. Now, this does not mean that it doesn't affect anyone else. No, it means that if you are Hispanic or from African American descent, you are more protected. But because this is a disease of old age as well, all ethnicities are affected, including men and women. So this is not just white females that get affected, everyone. It's a universal disease, okay? These are just people who are most at risk. All right, so next what I want to talk about, besides your gender, besides your ethnicity, obviously your age. So once, like I mentioned earlier, once you hit 20, your bone starts to go down, both men and women. Now for women, this bone loss gets a lot quicker, especially between 4 to 8 years after menopause. But then after the woman is 65 years old, the rate of bone loss is the same as it is for men. And this continues all the years to come, steadily, at a steady pace for the rest of their lives. Now, obviously there are things that put you at risk, like I said, but there are also things that are protective. So yes, your age and your ethnicity matter, and you know, if you're female or if you're male, all these things obviously play a role, but the number one thing you guys should know, oh hi little guy, he came to say hi. The one thing you guys should definitely know and always remember, hold on, this guy wants to be carried and picked up, is that there is always something you can do to prevent bone loss. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to somehow reverse the disease once it has started. What? Stop it. But it does mean that you can protect yourself. And what I would say is the most important thing is exercise. Now, yes, of course, swimming and biking are fantastic for your cardiorespiratory health. And if you want to know more about that, check out my previous video on exercise and different kinds of exercise you should be doing. But for osteoporosis and for your bone health, the most important thing to do is resistance training. So this means that you have to do exercises that are going to work your body against gravity. So you want to do running, you want to go hiking, you want to do weightlifting and weight training. You want to go dancing, because you guys know I love dancing. So you want to do things that are going to make you work against gravity, really get those muscles. Now, what I want to mention about this is that your bones, because they are kind of like the pillars of stability for your body, the stronger your muscles, the bigger your muscles, your bones are going to have to adapt to that heaviness and that weight. And so having bigger, stronger muscles is going to promote stronger bones, which is why the resistance training is super important. Another thing, a little bit of obesity or a little bit of higher weight, if you're in a little overweight range. Now, obesity is bad for your health, but for your bones, because you are heavier, it's going to make your bones adapt to maintain that skeleton. Now, yes, your weight is also going to increase rates of arthritis in your knees and pain in your joints when you're walking because you're weight bearing. But that weight kind of makes your bones work almost like if you were carrying a 40-pound bag all day on your shoulders, walking around, going up and down stairs. So it's going to make your muscles work against gravity, but instead of using weights, you're using your own weight. So yes, it can be protective, but I don't recommend gaining weight just for bone health. I would recommend exercising. So now, another really important thing to know here is that as you start aging, it becomes more and more important for you to get checked out by a doctor. Why? Because if you want to engage in physical activity, it's important that you get a clean bill of health. Now, you don't want to start working like a crazy maniac when you are, 65 and 70 and you've had chest pain in the past and you have heart disease. You want to make sure that you're able to in a healthy, safe way, start engaging in these exercises. Another really important tip that I can give you guys is that always look for someone who knows what they're talking about when it comes to exercise. There are a lot of trainers out there, but you want to look for those who are specialized in physical therapy and exercise physiology. Why? Because they are going to be the ones that are going to be able to direct you properly and adequately to protect you from hurting yourself, especially as you're getting older and you're trying to prevent bone fractures. So you don't want to be doing certain exercises like too much twisting and turning like you do in yoga. Yes, yoga, you want to do yoga, but it's a specific kind of yoga that doesn't require you to contort your body in all these different ways unless you have already been doing it for a long time and you continue doing it. So whenever you're starting a new exercise regimen, always be sure to get a clean bill of health first. Second, make sure you get proper instruction on how to do it, especially if you're going to go into the weightlifting and weight training. You want to get proper positioning. You want to do it without injuring yourself. This is all very, very important, especially as you get older. You want to exercise to prevent bone loss, but you don't want to exercise and increase your risk of injury or a fracture. Now, another risk factor that I failed to mention before is family history. So if you have a history in your family of your parents having a hip fracture or a bone fracture, this has actually been shown to increase your own risk of having a hip fracture or bone fracture in the future, regardless of your risk through your bone density. So this is very, very important. All these factors kind of play a role here, and it depends on what you do. I mean, obviously, these are a lot of things that you can't change. You can't change your age, you can't change your ethnicity, you can't change your parents' history, but you can change your lifestyle. And this becomes even more important when it comes to a lot of diseases, including osteoporosis. So if you're exercising regularly, which is even more important as you start getting older, if you've never exercised, it's really a great way to prevent more bone loss is to start engaging in some physical activity. Go for a walk. You don't have to run or jog if you can't sustain it, but you can go for walks. Another very important thing is you want to engage in exercises that are going to increase your stability. A huge issue once you start getting older is you kind of tend to lose your balance a little. It can have to do with weak muscles. It can have to do with just you've suffered some kind of stroke or what we call in medicine a cerebrovascular event. So what you want to do is you want to go to physical therapy. You want to gain strength in your stability muscles, your butt, your back, your legs, your knees. You don't want to wobble because any kind of lack of stability is going to increase your risk of falls. Now, falling is not a big deal when you're young. Maybe it is, but most times it's not. You can fall, you trip, you dust it off, you're, oh, I'm fine, whatever. But when you're older, falling can increase your risk of fractures. And this is very debilitating. If you don't use it, you lose it. So if you're not working out those muscles, if you're not strengthening your joints, not strengthening your stability and your walking, you're going to lose those muscles of stability. So it's very important to protect yourself because you have kids, you have family, and even if you don't, you have friends that love you and they want you to be around and they want to be able to go out walks with you because there's nothing better than being able to enjoy and socialize and do things that include some walking and some physical activity. So if you guys have any questions whatsoever on osteoporosis, I mean, I love hearing your feedback. If you guys want anything specific, like if you want me to talk about a specific topic, go right ahead and leave comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel down below and follow me on Instagram. As always, you guys have a wonderful weekend and I will see you next week. Bye.